Hi, it's Dwyer. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. It is December the 5th, 2019. Let's talk boxing. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, I'm aware of the fact that Teddy Atlas apparently is taking Anthony Joshua in this fight. I also saw a video. It's online. All of this is online on YouTube. I saw a video with a lot of guys I have a great deal of respect for. David Haye, Paulie Malignaggi, Carl Froch, right? A lot of guys. And Paulie Malignaggi, who's great on boxing, spectacular, was talking about how Anthony Joshua was prepared to face Jarrell Miller the first time, right? He was worked up. Miller's the kind of guy who gets under your skin, who has you ready to give your best, and that the fall off from Miller to Andy Ruiz was so great that AJ lost focus. AJ lost motivation. When he came in the ring, he may have taken a few things for granted. He wasn't as fired up as he would have been had he been facing Jarrell Miller. Right? The argument is that AJ had an off night. That AJ was distracted somehow. And that's why he lost to Andy Ruiz. So we're supposed to believe that this time it's different. Right? This time he's motivated. The argument is that this time the real AJ makes an appearance and beats Andy Ruiz. Now look, all I can say is I'm just going to have to respectfully disagree here. Right? I understand that very few people believe that Andy Ruiz is going to win this fight emphatically like I do. Right? I'm not afraid to play the role of Charles Lindbergh on this one. I'll hop in the plane. I'll try to cross the Atlantic here. Right? I'm sure there are a lot of people out there like me who quietly believe in Andy Ruiz, who don't believe the first fight was the fluke others do. Right? Who expect, at a minimum, Andy Ruiz to outbox Anthony Joshua. That's at a minimum. And who also expect, like I do, Andy Ruiz to be the person who gets the knockout. Right? But I'm guessing if you're an Andy Ruiz supporter, you know you're surrounded by AJ supporters. You know you're surrounded by the narrative. AJ's a great fighter, even though he's had, about half the fights of Deontay Wilder? AJ's a great fighter. Right? And that he just got a little derailed. He'll get back on track. He'll go on to years of dominance. Well, here's what I want people to consider. Right? The way I think boxing really works, and I don't mean to represent that I know more about boxing than anybody. Teddy Atlas or Paulie Malignaggi, superstar trainer, multiple titleist. I'm not saying I do. But the way boxing really works, right, from this gambling seat, from this seat in this venue here, right, Larry Holmes, who's still alive, who can be interviewed, right, understood that he could beat Muhammad Ali years before he fought Ali. Right, this is common in boxing, I believe. Larry Holmes was an Ali sparring partner. In fact, few people realize Larry Holmes was actually on the card for the Thriller in Manila. Right? So Larry went from being a guy who Ali busted up early when Larry's family came to visit camp. Right? Larry remembers that. Holmes then, over time, he was Ali's sparring partner for some time, came to figure out Ali and knew that he could beat Ali. He knew it. But who was Larry Holmes? Larry Holmes was a guy in Ali's camp. He was a sparring partner. So when Larry Holmes became heavyweight champion and he fought Ali, Larry Holmes was not intimidated in the slightest. Right? I mean, even though Ali was a big name, Holmes had come up through the system. He had been in the ring with Ali more than most of Ali's opponents. And he knew Ali could not handle his jab. He knew it. Well, let me just say, this Ruiz-Joshua fight, and I've made prior videos, I encourage people to look at them. This isn't Lennox Lewis against Hasim Rahman. This isn't Vladimir Klitschko against Layman Brewster. Far from it. This is a fight where Andy Ruiz, and we know it now, it was unclear before the fight. You knew the odds were ridiculous. It was unclear before the fight, but we know it with certainty now. Right? Because we've seen the 7 rounds. Andy Ruiz has certain structural advantages over Anthony Joshua. You know, what Joshua's thinking to me really doesn't matter. Right? The point is that Anthony Joshua has never faced, as a professional, a fighter with the hand speed of Andy Ruiz. Right? How do I know that? Because Andy Ruiz has the fastest hands in the heavyweight division. Right? Here online, there's an interview of Lennox Lewis. Right? And Lennox Lewis talks about being ringside, watching Ruiz's fight right before he fights Joshua, watching him against Dimitrenko, and being impressed by Andy's power. Understand, Andy is a combination puncher who throws power shots. Right? This guy puts punches together, quite frankly, like Ray Leonard. I am not kidding. Don't let the physique fool you. Anthony Joshua, whether he takes this fight seriously or not, cannot match, on his best day, Andy Ruiz's hand speed. He just can't. Let me also say, too, that Andy throws more combinations than Anthony Joshua. Right? When he lets his hands go, Andy is willing to take more risks than Anthony Joshua. And he's willing to load up on shots. And his shots get there faster. So when you look at that first Joshua fight, you'll notice Andy is hitting Joshua with very hard shots, one after the other. This isn't just hand speed. This is hand speed and power. More importantly, think about the flow of the fights. We'll talk about the 2 upsets I mentioned earlier. Lennox Lewis, Hasim Rahman. Lewis is looking good in that fight. You don't get the feeling that Rahman has faster hands than Lewis. You don't get the feeling that if a boxing match breaks out, Lewis is, in over his head. Vladimir Klitschko, Layman Brewster, same thing. Vladimir Klitschko looks like Vladimir Klitschko early in that fight. You get the feeling that Vladimir Klitschko's in control. Then both Lewis and Klitschko hit turbulence. Lewis gets sloppy, is over by the ropes. Who knows what he's thinking? Right? Vladimir Klitschko just couldn't handle the pacing that Layman Brewster brings to the table. Brewster's another guy who lets his hands go, is throwing a lot of power shots, is daring you to be in a shootout. Now that's not what I saw. in the Andy Ruiz Joshua fight. Right? First two rounds are feeling out rounds. It's like, hey, hi, my name's Andy. Hi, my name is Anthony. Right? I mean, the guys are feeling each other out. You get to the third round. Right? Great left hand. He's a gifted puncher. He has a puncher's chance in this fight. That's it to me. Great left hand that Joshua throws. Andy goes down. Andy's so stunned his hand's caught underneath him. When Andy gets up, Joshua's ready. Great right hand. Before Andy gets off a meaningful punch in the third round, he's been hit flush with two great Joshua shots. Now, folks, I don't care whether Joshua was thinking about Jarrell Miller or wasn't motivated or anything. Joshua's there and he's throwing his best artillery. Then something happens. Andy Ruiz pivots, stays in the pocket, comes back with combinations. Comes back with power shots. Starts head hunting Anthony Joshua. Folks, the fight doesn't start until that sequence. Andy's taken AJ's best shots. Now Andy's seeing if AJ can take his, and we know the answer. That answer is no. What did AJ do after Andy gets started in the third round that leads you to believe that the rematch is going to be any different than the first fight? Understand, the rematch is not going to have the, hi, I'm Andy, hi, I'm Anthony, 2 rounds. Right? Andy Ruiz knows he can drop AJ. AJ knows he can be dropped by Andy Ruiz. Folks, that changes everything. Right? This isn't Lennox Lewis cruising at 30,000 feet, then suddenly hits an ear pocket and is done. Right? This isn't Vladimir Klitschko looking great early in the fight, and then boom, he gets hit and he's tired all of a sudden and has a panic attack and loses. No, this is methodical. After the third round, if you believe that Anthony Joshua is going to be able to get on his back foot and stay away from Andy Ruiz, how did he do in staying away from Andy Ruiz in the latter part of the third round of the first fight? How did he do in staying away from Andy Ruiz in the fourth round of the first fight? The fifth round of the first fight? The sixth round of the first fight? Folks, when did AJ improve after hitting the canvas in that first fight? Where was the round where you saw the adjustment? Where was the round where you saw AJ on his back foot operating behind a jab and you thought, okay, AJ's back in the saddle? Folks, that's a methodical beatdown. Who lands the harder punches after the third round? How many rounds did AJ need to recover, folks? The fight goes to the 7th round. Okay, he has a car crash in the third round. What? The guy's recovery ability is that bad where he's falling apart after that in round after round? If Andy Ruiz is the one landing the harder shots after that third round, what leads anyone watching this video to believe that AJ has better defense than Andy Ruiz? He doesn't. He doesn't. So let me just tell you what happened here. You have a guy who's like Larry Holmes. Right? A guy who has just been waiting for the opportunity. A guy who's been known in boxing circles. Right? Maybe the Andy Ruiz, nice guy, happy to be here persona is just a persona. Maybe this guy's a poker player in boxing. He shows up. Maybe this is a guy who knows he's better. than Anthony Joshua. Certainly has no reason to think otherwise right now. Andy Ruiz is not a lucky puncher. Let's talk about who he is, because it's important. Folks, all of this is here online. Now, as I've mentioned before, this wasn't even Andy Ruiz's first heavyweight title fight. A sanctioning body ordered Andy to be in their championship fight. He earned it. Career achievement. He goes to New Zealand. He fights Joseph Parker. Folks, he goes the distance with Joseph Parker. In New Zealand, on the judges' scorecards, that's a close fight. I'm just telling you, Joseph Parker is a back foot game and a level of agility that Anthony Joshua, even with the weight loss, is not going to have. Let me also say, too, Andy thought he was winning that fight. Andy's on his front foot. Joseph Parker's on his back foot. By the way, Andy's defense in that fight allows him to go the distance. Right? I believe Andy, and I believe this is a mistake by Andy, I believe Andy remembers that fight and thinks that if he was just a little bit lighter, he would have been able to chase down Joseph Parker. Understand, that's what I call a location fight. If that fight took place in Southern California or Mexico, Andy Ruiz would have won that fight on the judges' scorecards. The fight took place in Parker's backyard. Right? Okay, forget that fight. Forget the fact that Andy isn't the virgin we all thought he was, in boxing terms, heading into the first AJ fight. Did you know that online right now, there is a video of former heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield talking about his sparring sessions with a young Andy Ruiz? And Evander, who's a boxing ambassador, right? You have a group of older fighters who want to see the sport advance. So Evander is magnanimous. He wants to really shine a light on younger fighters. I get that. Listening to him's like listening to George Foreman, right? These guys want to praise today's generation. You can tell the sport's been good to these guys. They want to make sure that the sport's good to others and continues. I get it. But in the YouTube video, Evander talks about how hard it was sparring with Andy Ruiz. That he didn't think he could get the upper hand on Andy. Now granted, Andy's young at the time, 19, 20. Evander's in his 40s at the time. Right? But this is Evander Holyfield, who fought and beat Mike Tyson. Who fought Riddick Bowe, won that middle fight. Who fought Lennox Lewis, got a draw the first fight. I didn't think he earned the draw, but officially he got a draw. In other words, this is a guy who fought some tough guys. Right? He fought James Toney. By the way, got destroyed by James Toney. People need to remember that fight when they tell me a smaller man can't beat a bigger man. Right? Well, understand. Let's just say Evander's experienced. Let's just say Evander's been in the ring with some damn good fighters. Let's just say he's held his own. You mean to tell me Andy Ruiz has sparred with him? Then you do a little bit of further research. There's a video online here of Jeff Mayweather, right? Floyd's uncle, talking about how Andy helped him with his fighter, former heavyweight champion Charles Martin. How Andy came in and sparred and stuff like that. Then you start realizing, hey man, this happy-go-lucky guy, by the time he's in the ring with AJ, he had been in the ring with at least 3 former heavyweight champions. At least. And let me just tell you, of the guys I've named, I can just tell you, just looking at the films, Andy had the fastest hand speed. Let me also say too, and I mentioned this before, right? Andy Ruiz used to train with Freddie Roach. Andy Ruiz used to train with Abel Sanchez. God, These are A-plus trainers. Well, understand, his promoter was Bob Arum. Andy then pays $700,000. Again, $700,000 to get out of his contract with Bob Arum so he could sign with Al Heyman. Folks, he's known by boxing insiders. This isn't the deer caught in headlights. This isn't the, hey, I got lucky off a punch and was able to make things work that first AJ fight. Right? This fight isn't about AJ's mindset. I'm just telling you, I think Andy Ruiz is going to win the fight based on talent. Right? I mean, I get it. The AJ narrative is a powerful one. It includes an Olympic gold medal. It includes a heavyweight reign where he fights multiple guys. Multiple guys who won the Olympic gold medal and who were heavyweight champion. Right? Povetkin, Klitschko. He also fights another reigning heavyweight champion. Right? Two of them, in fact. Charles Martin, Joseph Parker. Look, man, I applaud what AJ has done in the ring. Doesn't give him Andy Ruiz's hand speed. Doesn't give him Andy Ruiz's defense. Doesn't give him Andy Ruiz's ability to throw combinations. Worse yet, I see AJ losing weight. He almost doesn't look the same in pictures. Right? He's losing weight. As I've said before, right? You don't lose weight to stay in the pocket. This guy's losing weight so he can move around the ring. Folks, he doesn't have that part of his game. How well did he move around the ring in rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the first fight? Right? This isn't an Ali where you see the guy moving and you say, oh man, he's moving well. He knows how to move. But wow, he's carrying 5 or 10 extra pounds. No, that's not Joshua. Joshua's a big guy who used to have big muscles. Still has muscles, but not as big. Used to have big muscles. Gifted puncher who would take you out. The Dylan White fight. The Dominique Brazil fight. Right? This is a guy who would come in the Eric Molina fight. Right? This is a guy who lived off power shots, counters, collapsing the pocket, working you over. He was trying to develop a jab, but we all understood his jab wasn't quite a Larry Holmes, Vladimir Klitschko jab yet. We understood he was a guy learning on the job. Is it possible that he's running into a Larry Holmes type guy? These guys exist in boxing. Guys who have been in the ring with the Evander Holyfields of the world, who've been around big trainers, right? Who promoters understand, hey, I'm going to help this guy pay $700,000 to get out of his contract with another big promoter. You don't think Bob Arum and Al Heyman know boxing? You don't think that Bob Arum signed Andy Ruiz because he saw something in him? You don't think that Al Heyman signed Andy Ruiz because he saw something with him? You don't think that Andy Ruiz was already a championship level boxer who got a mandated shot at the title from a sanctioning body? You don't think that guy is a serious threat to a fighter with AJ's small percentage of fights? Come on. It's ridiculous. So here's what I think's going to happen. I think AJ definitely has a puncher's chance. I think he's a more dangerous puncher than Deontay Wilder because he's two-handed. Because when you're dealing with them, you really have to think about where the shots are going to come from. Right? The problem, though, is once this fight starts, there are going to be flashbacks. Understand, the hand speed gap is structural. That's structural. So I think AJ's going to, come in the ring. He's going to be moving more than he did the first time. Understand, the perception game's different. The first time, those slow rounds that could go to either fighter, they gave him to AJ. Right? He was the reigning champion. He was supposed to be the cash cow. He was the guy with the title. The other guy had to take off his waist. This fight, it's different, folks. AJ's the challenger. Oh, by the way, I know money is king. I get it, right? Is it really? Shouldn't AJ have given up some of the money to have this fight in the UK in front of his fans? I mean, wow, he's the challenger, and guess what? They're in a neutral location. Who knows how the Saudi crowd is going to react? Who knows who the Saudi crowd is going to root for? So if AJ comes out and he's trying to stay away from Andy, and Andy looks like he's hunting him down, and Andy's the one who enters the ring with the belt, are you going to give AJ any of those rounds? Aren't you going to expect AJ to plant his feet and to try to throw punches? Let's say AJ tries to throw punches and Andy collapses the pocket and starts to throw combinations. Do you think that in one training camp, Anthony Joshua has vastly improved his defense? Because I got to tell you, looking at the film of the first fight, he's hit with right hands, he's hit with left hands. Right, folks, understand there are two different rounds where the plane crashes. Third round and the seventh round. And I'm just here to tell you, he didn't look that good in the rounds between those. Right, the fight literally turns after Andy takes AJ's right hand. Aren't you concerned about that too? The fact that AJ's a big puncher and Andy's already taken AJ's right hand. Right? Isn't that a problem? Doesn't that kind of remind you of Hearns hitting Hagler with the right hand? Marvin taking 2 steps back and then continuing to come forward. Let me also say this too. Mentally, the fight's different than the first time. Understand how weird the first fight was. Andy's getting interviewed after the win. AJ comes over and interrupts the interview. Think about that. He interrupts the interview so he could praise Andy Ruiz. I was hoping Andy would turn around and say, hey, player, this is my biggest moment of my career. I'm the winner. This is the winner's circle. Don't interrupt me. What do I got to do to get my own airtime? I just beat your ass. Let me finish my interview. Right? AJ was treating it like some monumental upset of him, and he was trying to look magnanimous, a bit too much so to me. Right? You lose, understand that you lost. Especially when you've been knocked down multiple times in multiple rounds. Right? So forgive me, I'm mystified at this one. Maybe I'm in the spirit of St. Louis over the Atlantic. I'm mystified at this one. I haven't seen too many rematches where a guy was decked, 4 times the first fight? 4 times the first fight. By the way, these aren't flash knockdowns. Right? The ref is talking to AJ. He says, come to me, or something like that. And AJ's looking confused to me. Right? AJ is looking like he doesn't quite understand what's going on. Let me also say too, and this matters, right? I saw a lot of background dysfunction there, right? AJ loses. Andy Ruiz beat AJ. That's why he lost, right? So then I see a guy trying to come up to and maybe assault Eddie Hearn. Later I find out that that's a member of AJ's family who's upset with Eddie Hearn. Right? You see that and you start to realize, wow, there's some dysfunction in the background here. Right? To paraphrase Nassim Taleb, AJ's situation just doesn't look robust to me. Right? He has real issues on defense. He's fighting a guy who has faster hands and throws better combinations than him, who isn't afraid of him, who's not there to avoid him for 12 rounds, who's actually trying to hunt him down. Right? And you have members of AJ's family upset with the promoter. That seems combustible to me. That doesn't seem conducive to victory for me. So, to sum up, some people I respect greatly feel that AJ had a bad night. I think it's structural. I think he's fighting a boxing lifer, a guy who was an Olympian, a guy who, from early on, has been sparring with great fighters, a guy who, for years, seems to have surrounded himself with great trainers. By the way, research Andy's current corner. They've been around. Understand, Andy was looking for redemption after his loss to Joseph Parker. Andy's corner, who has been around, was looking for redemption. Right? The person on the zone who's figured it all out is Sergio Mora. Right? Listen to Mora talk about things. Do I know Mora keeps talking about Andy Ruiz as Rocky? Right? I know Sylvester Stallone is doing some kind of documentary on Andy Ruiz, portraying him as Rocky. Folks, Rocky didn't train with Freddie Roach and Abel Sanchez. Right? Rocky didn't spar with Evander Holyfield, Charles Martin. Rocky didn't have a heavyweight title shot mandated by a sanctioning body, right, before he hops in the ring for his big fight against Apollo Creed. Right? This is a Larry Holmes type. This is the guy in sparring who has to realize, you know what? I have faster hands than these decorated guys. You know what? If I let my hands go and I take risks and jump in the pocket on a guy, most men are going to wilt. Right? Look at how Andy gets rid of Dimitrenko. Understand, Lennox Lewis has been ringside at many fights. Right? Lennox Lewis is a boxing analyst. Lennox Lewis is ringside. Lewis, heavy puncher. Heavy puncher. Right? Lewis is ringside at the Dimitrenko fight. Lewis hears Andy's punches and realizes, man, this guy's a puncher. Right? There's a movie, The Color of Money. I've mentioned it before. There's a scene in there where the main character, Paul Newman's Fast Eddie, runs into a young guy who looks clueless in a pool hall, played by a young Forrest Whitaker. Right? It's as they're playing pool for money, Eddie needs some money, figures this guy's an easy mark. It's as they're playing that Eddie figures out he was the mark. So after Eddie is watching in horror as a superior pool player cleans the table and takes his money, right? And Eddie's supposed to be the one with the big reputation, right? Forrest Whitaker says the famous line to him. He says, hey, I need advice from you on one thing. Do you think I need to lose weight? That's what Forrest asks. Isn't that this fight? Right? We looked at the weight on Andy Ruiz and reached a bunch of conclusions. Right? We saw AJ, right, win some fights against guys with slower hand speed. And we thought this guy could handle it. What led you to believe that AJ could defensively handle a combination puncher who throws power punches, who can, literally insert a right hand hook in the middle of a combination and stay on rhythm? Right? I think the same thing happens in the rematch. AJ has a puncher's chance. I think any bet you make has to have, a hedge in it of AJ by stoppage. But understand, I'm expecting Andy Ruiz to be more dominant in the rematch than he was in the first fight. Right? He's tasted AJ's power. He knows AJ can't take his. He knows he can get off the canvas and beat AJ. He knows he can get off the canvas and knock down AJ multiple times. Right? You cannot trash talk a guy like this. Right? And I'm telling you, the judges know it too. So the first fight, you're looking at it and you're saying, oh, AJ looks buzzed. Right? The second fight, the interpretation from the crowd is going to be different. If AJ gets stood up, you're going to know AJ is hurt. I like the underdog. I'm shocked he's an underdog. I'm shocked he's an underdog at these odds. I like Andy Ruiz to win the fight. I'll hedge with AJ by stoppage. Right? Just understand that Andy Ruiz, while he's been knocked down, while he was knocked down by AJ, and it was a devastating knockdown, just understand that Andy Ruiz has never been stopped in a pro fight. That's how I see it. Hey, this isn't about AJ's moods and stuff like that. I don't think they matter. I don't think they matter to Andy Ruiz. Just like Larry Holmes entered the ring against Ali knowing he could beat Ali. He knew it. I believe Andy Ruiz knows it. Andy himself quietly has told some interviewers, I'm the more skilled fighter. Right? I'm just telling you, I didn't think AJ's corner did a great job the first time. I am shocked that AJ would take this fight right after losing the first fight. Right? There are a lot of fighters who lose and then fight other opponents to get back their confidence, to improve on some skills that failed them in the loss. Right? I'm shocked. I'm shocked that AJ's taking this fight at this time. I'm even more shocked that you have a rematch clause, right, that gives you some power, and you don't use that power to fight in your home country. Right? If a location fight breaks out, don't you want the judges hearing Englishmen yelling, AJ, AJ, AJ? Right? Instead, he's in Saudi Arabia. There'll be some AJ people in the crowd. There are going to be some Andy Ruiz people in the crowd. There are going to be some boxing fans who are neutral in the crowd, who want fairness, and who aren't going to give a challenger who doesn't land some meaningful punches, a challenger who runs for 12 rounds, the title. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. It's Thursday. The fight's just a few days away. Let me hear from you. I understand there's an AJ crowd out there with a different narrative. I hope you leave that narrative in the comment section of this video. As I said, this fight doesn't look to me like the Lennox Lewis, Hasim Rahman rematch. Right? Lewis was looking decent the first fight. This doesn't look like the Vladimir Klitschko Lehman Brewster rematch. By the way, I know Klitschko took some time to fight that rematch against Lehman Brewster. Right? Just the timing of this fight is way off to me. Anyway, that's how I see it. I look forward to your comments. Thanks for stopping by.